This is Dustin Pickering, and you are watching Parrot Literary Corner here, and I'm in Houston, Texas, and we are based in New York City. We have today Angie Mack, Angie Mack Reilly, who has lived and breathed creativity her entire life and has been employed as a leader in the arts for almost 20 years. She is the author of Chronic Creativity, a Diagnosis, a look at the condition and how. I guess I'll let you introduce yourself. The words are so small I can't read them. Sorry.
Okay.
I'll let you give me a little information about yourself there. I'll just let you. She's a musician as well as a poet. So we'll have a little music today as well as some poetry reading. So I'll just let you go forward from there with whatever bio information you think is relevant, and then we'll start.
Sure. Yeah, well, basically, I wrote a book a long time ago called Chronic Creativity, a diagnostic look at the condition and how to become infected. And it's a book that is free. It's on a website that's about 21 years old. It was a pioneering website in creativity. It's worldwide. It's called Creativity Portal. So you can look for Chronic Creativity on Creativity Portal. Let's see, what else did I have in my bio? That I do a myriad of things. I've been employed in the arts for most of my adult life. Most recent years, producing and directing musicals. I've produced over 100 musicals within the last, many years, primarily for children, but also with adults as well. And I also had in there that I have 2 books, poetry books. This is the first one. It's called Be True. And this one is called Be Free. These were basically poems from my journal entries over the years. So, and then I also wrote that I have a couple albums. My first album was called Comfort My People. And the second album was called Momentum. So, and then I talked about how my international claim to fame is finding the unmarked grave of the father of ragtime guitar. His name is Blind Blake. And then I've also done a lot of advocacy work for blues musicians that recorded in Grafton, Wisconsin.
Okay. That's fascinating. I'm curious about that, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. The first thing I want to start with is we talked about in the beginning is chronic creativity. What is the premise and purpose of the book? What are you exploring there?
Well, like I said, it's an older work, so it's it's kind of in the archives of my mind. But I had discovered that there was a way of thinking that I had that seemed to foster creativity. And what I did was I came up with different symptoms of chronic creativity, meaning you have it all the time. You can't really get rid of it. And so it's kind of a humorous look at creative people. Now, these are generalizations, and again, it's comedic, so it's not to be highly literal.
Right.
But some of the chapters are based on the symptoms of what I felt like creative people have. And so, for example, one of the chapters is called malaise. It's a medical term. And the malaise talks about how, as creative people, we often go through these dips where we're just not motivated at all to do anything. And sometimes those dips can be a short time. For me, sometimes it's been years of not being inspired to do anything creatively, followed by another wave of creativity. Another one of the chapters is called claustrophobia. So again, it's a humorous take on how creative people like to think outside of the box. They like to see things in a different way that others don't. Another chapter is called problemplasty, and it's about how creative people are always trying to find solutions to problems. So it's got, you know, it's kind of a medical slant on creativity in a humorous, lighthearted way.
Okay.
So, but
Very
it's gotten
interesting.
it's gotten quite a bit of popularity online. It's been up for a long time. I think at least 20 years. Yeah.
Wow, long time. That is definitely a
Yeah.
very long time. So, what do you think that that could be nurtured? I mean, like, you know, when people are reading this, are they getting an idea of how a creative mind is, or are they getting more of like a, you know, stand-up comedy, or, you know, is it something that you think reading, can people get insight into the creative process?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that they can get insight into creativity, but I gave it kind of a comedic tone.
Right.
I like comedy. I actually really do. I like comedy a lot. But yes, you can definitely get things out of it. In fact, one of the chapters is called Scatterbrain, and it talks about how creative people can sometimes get distracted, you know, with a variety of projects and things. I've seen that a lot with working with creative people. I would say that's the most popular chapter. A lot of people have said, "Oh wow, you know, I'm the same way. You know, I'm very creative, but you know, I also multitask and do different things. Sometimes get distracted, you
Right.
know." So.
So you also do a lot of work in music, and I'm curious. You teach music, and I'm wondering, from your experience, do you find there are traits in learners that determine their success, or is there a trademark quality you recognize in your most outstanding students?
I would say that goodness, I've literally taught thousands of people. Um, I would say that the ones who do well, and again, this is
Right.
generalization, but a lot of times they will come from a musical background. You know, there's exceptions, but a lot of times they'll come from a creative background, kind of like myself. I have a long lineage of creative people in my family. So I do see that. I do see creativity and musicianship running through certain families. Again, there are exceptions. Um, some of my best students, I would say, create their own content. And in order to do that, to create their own content, to create their own songs, they have to understand, well, they don't have to understand, but it's helpful to understand concepts of music theory, which is the mathematics of music. I like to encourage innovation. I like to encourage thinking outside of the box musically. I also like to encourage emotional playing.
Mhm.
I would say that people who do well, and especially children, they're the ones who naturally gravitate towards an instrument as opposed to being the kind that have to constantly be reminded, Johnny, practice your piano, you know, Mary, time to practice piano. Those kind of kids don't always do so well. It's got to come from within. So if a child is interested and wants to learn music, or if an adult is interested and wants to learn music, that is really the prime time to do it. It has to be enjoyable. So
Mhm.
I always encourage parents to think of playing the instrument as something that's fun. You know, they can practice their scales and their music, but also I encourage them to step outside of the box and just play things that sound good. And that's actually how I started. Was I did not have any formal music training growing up.
Mhm.
I had this condition where anytime I saw a piano, my hands went like this, like a magnet, you know. I was like, there's something within me that was just like, you know, drawn to. Anytime I'd go in a room and I'd see a piano, I'd go and play it, you know. So there was something inside of me that really just felt called to play. And so it's got to come from within. It's parents can't really force it on kids. They, you know, they can do more harm than good. I've had a lot of adult students who have said, you know, I used to learn piano as a kid, but my teacher was so mean and strict, and my parents were, you know, making me practice, and I'd rather play outside. And they lost interest and they quit playing music forever. And that is tragic.
Right.
So number one, you gotta love music. You gotta love the experience of learning it.
So would you maybe like to play us a little song, or?
Sure, I have a few options. I did set up a microphone back here. So I figured, due to copyright reasons, maybe I'll play an original song. So I've got the microphone, and I'm going to play and sing, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay. And what I'll do is I'll do a little bit of a sound check, and you let me know if it's like way out of balance, you know, like if I need to turn the voice down or something.
Okay.
But this is a song called He Makes All Things New. And it's actually a spiritual song that has been sung in congregations, multiple congregations. I have a background in gospel music and spiritual music. It's not my only genre, but it's one of them. So this is a spiritual song that has been sung in different congregations, in contemporary congregational settings. So, okay, I'll do a little test first.
All right.
Welcome to my music studio. I give lessons in here.
Interesting.
Yeah. A lot of them have been online due to COVID.
Yeah.
All right, I'm just gonna do a little, and just give me a little feedback of what you think. He makes all things new. He makes all things new. What do you think?
I think it sounds pretty good.
Okay, so the vocals aren't like way too.
No, they're mixed in there pretty good.
Okay, I'm just gonna turn the treble down a little bit. And I think I might shorten it for the, you know, who knows. He makes all things new. He makes all things new. It doesn't matter what the past, he makes all things new. He makes all things new. He makes all things new. It doesn't matter what the past, he makes all things new. New. So that's cutting it a little bit short. I also like to mess around on the piano and just improvise blues.
Okay.
So I can do that now or later, doesn't matter.
Well, since you're already there, I guess go ahead and give it a shot. So see what it sounds like.
Okay. All right, I'm just gonna I think change my settings a little bit here. Check one. All right, so I think we'll add a little honky tonk piano. And let's see. I'm just gonna put on a basic drum beat. Drummers everywhere are gonna cringe, but it's okay. Okay, so we got a little swing, a little honky tonk. Just for fun.
Jamming there. That's awesome. I love it. Fun.
Yeah.
Very fun.
Yeah, it is. It's a good emotional release.
Right. And speaking of blues, you mentioned Blind Blake and finding his death certificate, I believe, helping find his death certificate. What did that mean to the history of blues music?
Huh. Oh boy. Yeah. What did Blind Blake mean or finding?
Well, we can go with both or whichever you find to be most easy to relax into question-wise.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I love that. Yes. Well, Blind Blake recorded in Grafton, Wisconsin, which is where I am right now. About 2 blocks from where I am. Blind Blake recorded some music, and he's the father of ragtime guitar. And after his recording sessions in Grafton, he disappeared. Nobody knew what happened to him. There were speculations that, he lived in Chicago, maybe got hit by a car, maybe froze to death. Researchers had been looking for answers to what happened to him because he was so foundational in the kind of music that he created, ragtime guitar. So he was really a pioneer. He was the father of Delta blues. And so researchers had been looking for him ever since, like I said, he recorded in Grafton and couldn't find him. And long story short, there was a team of researchers, international researchers, and one of them found a little piece of information in a Chicago Defender newspaper, and it talked about a blind man and a blind musician. And so one of the researchers contacted me from the Netherlands and said, hey, can you go to the Milwaukee courthouse and apply for Blind Blake's death certificate? He said, we think that he might be there. So I applied for Blind Blake's death certificate, and it came to my house. And as I opened it up, it was amazing, because I knew there was going to be information in there that would unlock a lot of other clues into his life. And it talked about how he died of tuberculosis. Nobody knew that. And that he had lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Nobody knew that. So, and it also talked about him being born in Newport News, and that he had a wife named Beatrice. So there was all these little clues. And since then, there have been other researchers digging into his life, and his influence on music as a whole around the world. You know, like I said, he's a pioneer in music. So it was very important. And then it talked about where he was at and what cemetery, and it was a cemetery in Milwaukee. And when I went there, it took quite a bit of digging and working with the people who worked at the cemetery to find exactly where he was buried. And we found where he was buried, but there wasn't any headstone, there wasn't any marking that this blues giant had recorded, and then, you know, much less died in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I had advocated for him to get a headstone. And so now if you go to the site, you will see, it'll say Arthur Blind Blake, and it'll have a picture of him playing the guitar. There was one photograph known to have been taken of him, and it was taken in Grafton, Wisconsin. Same with a photograph of Charlie Patton, who is the father of Delta music. He also recorded in Grafton, Wisconsin. So there's a lot of blues history here that I don't think people realized the full scope of how important that was to American music and culture as a whole, as well as its ripple effect on music around the world. So I spearheaded a whole movement of education and networking to bring these musicians to the forefront. So there are a lot of books around the world that I've worked on in regards to this history. There's a book that was done in Russian. There's a Japanese magazine that I'm in for, you know, finding the grave site of Blind Blake. A lot of international interest, which is really, really cool to see. So a lot of my friends and colleagues are actually people around the world.
Right.
So
right. It's always good to get a lot of people interested in what you're doing.
I've got
beautiful.
I have one question regarding your name, Ozaki Talent. Are you related to the Anishinaabe in Wisconsin?
Pardon?
Are you related to the Anishinaabe, the First Nation builders in Wisconsin? Anishinaabe.
Am I related to them?
Yeah.
Yes.
No. To the musicians?
No, to first, what was it? The First Nation builders?
Yeah, First Nation builders in Wisconsin. Like Dennis Sweet. I'm sure you know Dennis D. Sweet.
Well, Ozaki Talent is my business.
Okay.
Ozaki is the county that I live in. It's in southeastern Wisconsin, just above Milwaukee. So I have a business called Ozaki Talent, and I primarily teach music lessons, acting lessons. That's why it says Ozaki Talent. That's not my
How did you derive
name.
the name? How did you get that name? It doesn't sound English.
Oh, it's actually a Native American word.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's Native American for the county that I live in, Ozaukee County. Yeah.
Impressive.
So can you tell us about Paramount Records and what work you do regarding them?
Yeah, well, you look, I'm a very visual person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm gonna get a couple props because it's easier for me to describe visually. But basically, Paramount Records, if you can see this, was a record label, and can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. These were 78 records that were mass produced in Grafton, Wisconsin, where I live. And they distributed 25% of the nation's race records, is what they called them. Basically, it was Black musicians, and they had music that was recorded and then primarily sold to Black audiences. So they produced 25% of the nation's race records, and the building was along the Milwaukee River. It was powered by the Milwaukee River. This was in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So these were 78 records. And there were mass artists who recorded just a couple blocks from where I live. And it all started with a chair factory, and it was called the Wisconsin Chair Company. And what they did was they made phonograph record cabinets out of wood. And from that, they decided to give away 78 records with the phonograph cabinets. And so, they got into the music business, not as their main passion, but as kind of a side gig, a way to make money on their furniture. So the record label was very popular. It's quite complicated. There was a guy from the Netherlands who wrote a book. His name is Alex Vandertook. And he's written, books about it, but it was called the New York Recording Laboratories. And then the Paramount record label was under that. But it was during the Great Depression is when they brought a lot of the pioneers of Delta music from the Mississippi Delta up to Grafton. Many of the blues legends that recorded here were Charlie Patton, Skip James, Blind Blake, Willie Brown, Big Bill Brunsey, Geechee Wiley, just so many names of people who were pioneers in the blues, which then gave rise to rock and roll and other genres of music. And this isn't a good, it's not the best drawing, but how I can describe it is that the Delta blues would be here in the center, and people would listen to these records. Like I said, they shipped out 25% of the nation's race records, and these records would be listened to by different audiences, and people would be inspired to play and learn how to play from listening to these records. And so you have, people like Muddy Waters who learned, and Johnny Lee Hooker, and B.B. King, and these artists inspired other artists, Led Zeppelin, Eric Clapton, it goes on and on. This is kind of a way to look at it, and it inspired other genres around the world. So Paramount Records had a real a real ripple effect. And my involvement began around 2003. And I started a campaign, a volunteer campaign of educating people about the record label, because this history was starting to get forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began a very in-depth journey of educating others. Part of that was getting a website online about the record label. This was the first website that had this information. It was called paramountshome.org. And this was around 2004, maybe, that we started to put this website out. Myself and Alex Vandertook from the Netherlands put this together, and it was kind of like an online digital archive. Before even a lot of the libraries were digitizing their material. So we had won a Wisconsin Historical Society website award in 2006 because what we were doing was very cutting edge. I knew that people around the world needed to be educated about this label. And the website was how we did it. And from that, we connected to people around the world via forums. This was before Facebook and social media. I was emailing all kinds of people around the world. We were collecting archives and materials, and it's grown substantially. You know, a lot of people have written books about it. So I guess I'm known as a historian or educator about Paramount Records. On my website, there's a lot of links if people want to find out more. One of the things that I did was I wrote the show PBS History Detectives, and they came and filmed in Grafton, Wisconsin, and kind of told the story about the record. So that's on YouTube if you look up Lost Musical Treasure. But I had written the producers of that show and worked with them for a good year to bring about that segment that aired nationwide. So a lot of my efforts were very pioneering, spearheading, which is what I do best as a creative person.
Entrepreneur. So we have about 4 minutes left. Would you like to share a poem with us?
Oh, sure. Well, 4 minutes, okay. Okay, this one is just kind of a silly poem.
Okay.
It's kind of about, it's just about social status, social structure. I won't go into it, but it's a little, it's playful. Okay, it's called The Zumpers. The Zumpers hailed the Zitherbot on the 7th day of Laughalot, and the Zanzu took the time to sip the Zitherbot wine. The festivities were zectified, and Zally Wally came. Just when it appeared that Zony Wony ate the festive bologna, the Zonar indicated rain. Zony Wony was surely shunned, and Zally Wally was stunned. The Zanzu scoffed, and the Zumpers fought, and they cursed the Zitherbot. It's playful.
Right.
My nature is very playful. Yeah, I work with kids for a living. You know,
it has a little bit of a I don't know, Shel Silverstein or Dr. Seuss feel to it.
Yeah.
Playing, creating new words and playing with concepts and and playful. So do you teach online courses or for musicians as and theater as well, or where can people find you and online to if they're interested in anything?
Yeah, my personal website is angiemackreilly.com, and it's a portfolio that I'm starting to put together of my work because there's so much of it. So I'm archiving a lot of all the different things that I'm doing on that website. My business is called Ozaki Talent. So ozakitalent.com. I am registering for classes right now for individual lessons for adults and for youth. I teach piano, guitar, voice, percussion, acting, songwriting, and like I said, I'm registering for summer. And yeah, I love mentoring others in the arts. That's primarily what I've done. The Paramount stuff has been volunteer. It's been a labor of love. It's work that has needed to be done. But my career is mentoring others in the arts and producing musicals, but I've not done that since COVID.
So what is your final message for artists, and if you can give it to us in about 15 seconds?
I want to tell artists that they're very valuable, and you know, that artists are the ones who will come up with solutions to problems in the society, and musicians and artists are the ones who can inspire others to action emotionally. They are able to connect with people emotionally, and when people are moved emotionally, they're more apt to change, or they're more apt to see things in a different light. So we are very important. We are
absolutely
very important.
A great message to end with. This has been New York Parrot's Literary Corner. I am Dustin Pickering. We've had Angie Reilly here discussing blues. And if you like what we do,